Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. On this channel we post writing tips, unboxings, book hauls, book reviews and the occasional vlog, and today we are doing a 2022 wrap up. It is the end of 2022, we are going into 2023 and I want to discuss the 3 best books but also the 3 worst books that I've read this year. Before we get into that, as always, if you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Your continuous support means a lot, so thank you guys so much. Now, I don't want to end 2022 on a bad note, so let's start with the first 3 worst books I've read for 2022. Now, the first one of these is one I've already given away, and that is Of Women and Salt by Gabriela Garcia. This book meant well, but read just like a load of prologues. Like every single protagonist, it just felt like I was reading the prologue to their story and then moving on to another story and yet another prologue. I never got into any of the characters. I never cared about them enough. It was trying to do something really good and important, and it just fell flat for me. And I know this may be controversial because this is a bestseller, but for me, it fell short of what it was trying to achieve. As this is one I've already actually given away, I'll read you guys the blurb, but it's from my phone. In present-day Miami, Jeanette is battling addiction. Daughter of Carmen, a Cuban immigrant, she is determined to learn more about her family history from her reticent mother and makes the snap decision to take in the daughter of a neighbour detained by ICE. Carmen, still wrestling with the trauma of displacement, must process her difficult relationship with her own mother while trying to raise a wayward Jeanette. Steadfast in her quest for understanding, Jeanette travels to Cuba to see her grandmother and reckon with secrets from the past destined to erupt. From 19th century cigar factories to present-day detention centres, from Cuba to Mexico, Gabriela Garcia's Of Women and Salt is a kaleidoscopic portrait of betrayals, personal and political, self-inflicted and those done by others, that have shaped the lives of these extraordinary women. A haunting meditation of the choices of mothers, the legacy of the memories they carry, and the tenacity of women who choose to tell their stories despite those who wish to silence them. This is more than a diaspora story, it is a story of America's most tangled, honest human roots. Yeah, so as you can probably tell from that blurb, this being one of my worst reads of 2022 is probably a very unpopular opinion. However, it is how I feel. This book read to me just like a load of prologues, one after the other, and I never fully got involved in any of the women's lives. I honestly, sadly, didn't care that much about any of them, and although their troubles were very problematic and very extreme, they also didn't come across so much so because I didn't know them well enough. They were just names on a page, and each character just had barely any pages about each one, so I couldn't get into them. It was trying to achieve something so great, but I believe I've read books which have achieved the same, but in a better way than this particular book itself. On to book 2 of my worst reads, and that is Paris by Starlight by Robert Dinsdale. This one I was really upset about. I absolutely loved The Toy Makers, which is Robert Dinsdale's first book. It was amazing. My book club read it and everyone loved it, so I was so excited to read this one, and it fell flat. I'll read you guys the blurb. Every city has its own magic. Every night on the long journey to Paris from their troubled homeland, Levin's grandmother has read to them from a very special book called The Nocturne. It is a book full of stories and heroic adventures of their people who, generations before, chose to live by starlight. With every story that Levin's grandmother tells them in their new home, the desire to live as their ancestors did grows, and that is when the magic begins. But not everyone in Paris is won over by the spectacle of Paris by starlight. There are always those who fear the other and unexplained, the strangers in their midst. How long can magic of night rub up against the ordinariness of day? How long can 2 worlds occupy the same streets and squares before there is an outright war? Again, it sounds so promising, and the general premise was really interesting. However, Robert Dinsdale fell because the women in it are just ultimately useless. As soon as our main protagonist becomes pregnant, that's it. Somehow, she's not important and nothing she does changes anything or matters. It just infuriated me, and it started with such promise and then honestly just kind of went on a bit. I was so disappointed. I'm not saying that someone else wouldn't absolutely love it, but for me it just didn't have the same magic as The Toy Makers. And finally, let's get on to my 3rd worst read of 2022 so we can finally get on to the good things of this video, and that is Fire and Blood by George R.R. Martin. Yeah, this one I half blame myself about. I made a mistake. This book was a gift to us, so I didn't honestly read the blurb before reading it. I just knew it was the story of the Targaryens, and I picked this up looking for an epic fantasy read. I was in the mood for nitty-gritty, character-driven, take me away from this world, and it's not that. It is a history book of the Targaryens. It is a whole book of telling, and I was not prepared for that. But I'll read you guys the blurb. With all the fire and fury fans have come to expect from internationally best-selling author George R.R. Martin, this is the first volume of the definitive two-part history of the Targaryens in Westeros. Centuries before the events of A Game of Thrones, House Targaryen, the only family of dragonlords to survive the Doom of Valyria, took up residence on Dragonstone. Fire and Blood begins their tale with legendary Aegon the Conqueror, creator of the Iron Throne, and goes on to recount the generations of Targaryens who fought to hold that iconic seat all the way up to the civil war that nearly tore the dynasty apart. What really happened during the Dance of Dragons? Why was it so deadly to visit Valyria after the Doom? What were Maegor the Cruel's worst crimes? What was it like in Westeros when dragons ruled the skies? These are but a few of the questions answered in this essential chronicle as related by a learned Maester of the Citadel. With all the scope and grandeur of Gibbon's The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, Fire and Blood is the ultimate Game of Thrones, giving readers a whole new appreciation for the dynamic, often bloody and always fascinating history of Westeros. I mean, the blurb basically tells you it's a history of, but I thought the history would be written in an interesting, character-driven fantasy style, not as a history book with a load of name-dropping and just all of it told. I cannot even remember half the names now in this book. It just went on and on for so long, and I read it when the TV series came out, and that did help. It gave me some character to go with some of the characters in this book, and I honestly enjoyed it more once that happened. But until that point, I mean, it's a hefty 700 plus page book. It's massive undertaking, and I kind of felt it. Now let's get on to my 3 best reads of 2022, the positive side of this video and the one I'm more excited to tell you guys about. The first read that I would highly recommend reading that I read in 2022 is The Devil in the Marshalsea by Antonia Hodgson. I couldn't put this book down. I read it so fast. It's a typical whodunit book set in the Marshalsea, which is a debtor's prison in London, but it's just done in such a fun and quirky way with just such memorable characters. I loved it. I would highly recommend reading it, especially if you're just looking for a quick, gripping, fun read. Mwah. I'll read you guys the blurb. London 1727, and Tom Hawkins is in trouble. The wayward son of a country parson, his taste for wine, women and cards has led him in irons to the notorious Marshalsea debtor's prison. The Marshalsea is a dark and dangerous place at the best of times, but when an inmate is brutally murdered, the prison is soon gripped by fear and suspicion. Worst of all, Tom is sharing a cell with the prime suspect. Now he must risk everything to uncover the truth or be next to die. I loved it. So fun. Really quick, easy read. If you're looking for a stop and filler for someone who likes crime or historical fiction, get this one. Well worth it. The second best read of 2022 was one I've read before, so this was actually its second reading, but we all know I will not stop going on about this book, and that is The Guest Cat by Takashi Hirate. This is a translated book by a Japanese poet, and it's just a really, really short, look how short that is, read about a writer who moves house with his partner to a rented place in a really old style Japanese house and meets a cat called Chibi. And every single chapter kind of just teaches you something else about life, and it's just written in such a poetic and beautiful way. It's just such a lovely book. I'll read you guys the blurb. A couple in their 30s live in a small rented cottage in a quiet part of Tokyo. They work at home as freelance writers. They no longer have very much to say to one another. One day a cat invites itself into their small kitchen. She is a beautiful creature. She leaves, but the next day comes again, and then again, and again. New, small joys accompany the cat. The days have more light and colour. Life suddenly seems to have more promise for the husband and wife. They go walking together, talk, and share stories of the cat in its little ways, play in the nearby garden. But then something happens that will change everything again. The Guest Cat is an exceptionally moving and beautiful novel about the nature of life and the way it feels to live it. The book won Japan's Kiyama Shohi Literary Award and was a bestseller in France and America. Such a cute read. I would highly recommend. It's so short. Just get this for any cat lover or anyone who is into literature as a stock and filler book. I have read it twice and I will read it again. There's just something magical, even though it's set in the modern day, and you know I like to escape the modern world by reading books not based in the now. This book is based in the now, and yet I still absolutely love it and would highly recommend anyone reading it. Finally, the third and final book of my best reads of 2022 is Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. I absolutely adored this book. I read it so quickly. It is a YA fantasy, really easy to read. It's such a book of escapism. You go to a magical world of gods, and it is a romance which doesn't go the way you'd think it would, and I found it so refreshing. Everyone is powerful. There is no gender specific power. Men and women both fight, and they don't care who's sleeping with who. It's so refreshing. I loved it. It's such a modern take on an old legend. I'll read you guys the blurb. Raised on the moon, Jingying was unaware she was being hidden from the celestial emperor, who exiled her mother for stealing the elixir of immortality. But when her magic flares and Jingying's existence is discovered, she is forced to flee her home, leaving her mother behind. Alone, powerless, and afraid, Jingying makes her way to the Celestial Kingdom, a land of wonder and secrets. In disguise, she trains alongside the Emperor's son, master in archery and magic despite the passion which flames between them. To rescue her mother, Jingying embarks on a quest, confronting legendary creatures and vicious enemies. But when forbidden magic threatens the kingdom, Jingying must challenge the ruthless Emperor, leaving her torn between losing all she loves or plunging the realm into chaos. Inspired by the legend of Chang'e, the Moon Goddess, this captivating debut weaves Chinese mythology into a sweeping adventure of love and family, immortals and magic. It was just such a beautiful read and such a beautiful book as well. It was so easy, so fast. It is a YA, which means it's very accessible to everyone. It's inclusive, it's modern, and yet talking about an ancient Chinese legend. I adored it, and I would now read any book by Su Lin Tan. Any of them, give me, I will devour it. And that's it for my 2022 wrap-up. So just to recap, for the 3 worst reads of 2022, and you can disagree with me on this is just my personal opinion. 3 worst reads were Of Women and Salt by Gabriela Garcia, George R. R. Martin's Fire and Blood, and Paris by Starlight by Robert Dinsdale. These were my 3 worst reads. I'm not saying all of them didn't have something good about them. They all did have something good. The reviews are on my channel to the individual books if you would like to see them. The link is below this video. There is something good about them. It just wasn't for me. And then my 3 best reads of 2022. The 3 books which I really will remember from this year are The Devil in Marshalsea by Antonia Hodgson, The Guest Cat by Takashi Hirate, and I can't balance them, and The Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. These 3 books I read this year, I absolutely loved and would highly recommend anyone to read them in 2023. And that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoy what you see. If you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. If you'd like to see as soon as I upload, click the little bell down below. You can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram or Tumblr. I post general bookish pictures as well as my writing tips and unboxings on there. And thanks for watching guys. Bye!